Hey friend, today we're going to be painting this spring season landscape featuring California's Big Sur coastline with some California poppies. Without further ado, let's get to painting. For today's landscape, I am using 6 colors. We've got orange, cadmium yellow, cobalt turquoise, Prussian blue, sap green, and burnt umber. In addition to that, I am using my size 4 and size 8 and a sponge brush. These brushes here are by the Princeton brand. And then I'm also going to be using a little bit of white gouache. You could also use white acrylic paint as well if you don't have gouache. The paper I've taped down here is a size 5 by 7 inches. And to get started, I'm just going to take my sponge brush here and just paint some water about in the top third or so, no more than halfway. And then for the sky, I want to use some Prussian Blue, and I'm using my size 8 round Princeton brush, and I'm just going to apply some of this color just throughout the sky, leaving some white spaces available for some fog or clouds that are coming in. I'm just going to let this sky set and dry, and then after that we will move on towards our ocean and our coastline. Okay, now I just want to take a moment to lightly sketch out our coastline, and I'm going to just kind of mark about 2 inches into the painting here. I'm just going to make this mark here as my guide, and then I'm going to just outline almost like a triangular hill here, and then it's going to slope upward slightly and gradually increase in height and swoop towards the right. And then from here, I kind of just want to go slightly downward from the coastline and just do a horizontal line across, and then we'll also have a little bit of a closer area of the coastline swooping down here. So I'm just going to do a slightly angled line here and then just bring it across the page. The next thing I'm going to do is take my sponge brush and just apply a wash of water. And it's okay if it kind of mutes or bleeds out the sketch of the green right here, but I'm just going up against that sketch line and applying a wash of water. Slowly but surely, we're going to build our ocean next. First, I'm just going to do a wash of yellow just in the first bottom centimeter here. I'm also going to layer on top of this yellow just a touch of orange. Now, after I've applied that orange, I'm going to mix up some sap green, and I'm going to start applying sap green just in a loose formation, using the tip of my brush here just to kind of blot some of the green. And this is going to be some of the greenery of the poppies and just the ground below. From here, I'm going to now take some Prussian blue, and I'm just going to apply the Prussian blue right at this waterline. And I'm just going to carry out this Prussian blue. Oops, I got a little dot there. All good. Only happy little mistakes, as Bob Ross would say. Okay, so I'm just applying the Prussian blue just at the kind of base area here of the island and all the way across. And before I do anything else, I do want to blot some of this color a little bit using the paper towel, and creating this negative space is just going to allow a nice soft transition between where the poppies will be and where the ocean will meet. I'm just continuing a little bit more with my paper towel just to blot and lift some of the pigment in this transition area. And then next I want to just grab a little bit of Cobalt Turquoise. I'm using light Cobalt Turquoise, and I'm just going to do a few touches of this really pretty turquoise color. Honestly, I think it's my favorite color. One of, I would say, in the top 5 favorite colors of Winsor and Newton. And I just want to apply just a few touches of this really gorgeous color here. And here and there, if needed, I can always kind of mute down just a little bit of that color just to buff it out in that transition again if needed. Okay. And then I'm gonna just relayer a little bit more Prussian Blue at the base here and just kind of allow it to kind of bleed out. I'm using kind of this left to right horizontal motion to help guide it. Okay, so from here, I'm just gonna let this set. But for now, I can actually start to mix a little bit of a darker green. For my darker green, I'm going to do Sap Green, a little bit of Prussian Blue, and some Burnt Umber. Now I have a little bit of a deeper green, and this shrubbery here, or this greenery that we're going to have as the base of our poppies, we can now just start to add this green combination and just add a few touches just to give that a little bit more shading and a little bit more depth. And while that further sets, I'm going to take some water and just lightly apply it into the silhouette of our island here. And I'm just being mindful, you can see some of the blue kind of bleeds in. So I'm just gonna kind of lightly sketch a slight white gap there, and I'm gonna not paint over that so that way not all the ocean bleeds into the island. Excuse me, the coastline. This is Big Sur, so it's not an island, but it's a coastline. So I'm just adding some water there, and then I'm just gonna first apply some Sap Green just towards the top. Eventually I'll use the darker green that we just mixed to shade towards the base or the bottom. And I'm just gonna apply a light wash of this Sap Green. And layered on that, I'm just gonna add a touch of yellow just to give a nice vibrant highlight. And on the top of the coastline here, I'm gonna just use the tip of my brush just to give some texture on the island, so that way it's not a perfectly kind of smooth line with no texture. I do want some irregular kind of texture towards the top. Okay, so I'm gonna let my painting dry for a moment before I add any more touches, and then we will come back and add our poppies. Okay, now that my paint here has pretty much dried, I'm now gonna just load up on some orange, and now I'm using my size 4 brush, and just throughout this kind of lighter area of the yellow, I'm using quite a concentrated amount of orange, and I'm going to paint some almost like upside down triangle shapes, almost like these little bell shapes, and I'm gonna do a few that are really small and some that are kind of wider towards the top. I also want to incorporate a few poppies where maybe some of the petals are here on either side. And to do that, I just simply start with that kind of upside down triangle look, and then I just do a swooping motion with the tip of my brush on either side to connect at the base. So just throughout here, I'm gonna just carry on and do some kind of irregularly sized poppies, so that way there's some variety, but I'm just carrying on with that kind of upside down triangle or bell shape. Once I have more of those distinct kind of poppy shapes, I just want to use the tip of my brush with a little bit of orange just to do a few concentrated amounts of some orange textured dots. These are just going to mimic some tinier kind of underbloomed poppies or farther away poppies. And I'm just incorporating these little dots kind of throughout, but not overboard, just in a few areas. And that's just going to make the poppies that are blooming nice and full. While the poppies set and dry, I am going to now kind of work with our ocean and our island above. First, starting out, I want to take some burnt umber, and I'm just going to use burnt umber here just to give some more depth to our coastline here. And I am just going to apply burnt umber in a concentrated amount, just like so, putting it and applying it at the bottom of this coast in a kind of variegated fashion, just very loose. And I'm also going to do just a couple coastal little rocks here, just using the tip of my brush, just doing kind of a rough edged rock formation. So starting with like a slight oval shape and then just giving it some rough edges, just like that. And then from here, I'm going to use the darker mixed green that we used before, where I combined Prussian Blue, Payne's Gray, and Sap Green. And using that color, I am just going to use the tip of my brush just to get this nice, beautiful shaded texture here. This coastline area here, you could see I'm just doing a line across because there's some separation from this higher kind of mountain hill-like area and this lower one here. And I'm just going to be shading this kind of right side of each of the subtle hilltops here with this darker shade of green. And just a little bit above this burnt umber here. And then from here, I'm just going to take some plain old sap green, some unmixed Sap Green, and I want to use the tip of my brush and just apply a little bit of this like toothy kind of texture just to give the hills of this coast some variegation here, so that way it's not too flat, but we've got some nice shading going on, and it's okay if the brown slightly bleeds in a little bit. And I'm just subtly just carrying on this texture. Do a little bit on this little hilltop here as well. And then I'm gonna just go in and take a little bit more dark green just to layer some of that in those shaded areas. Maybe just a little bit in this transition of the burnt umber as well. Okay, so from here, I'm gonna start utilizing our white gouache here that we've got. I'm using a size 14 mil Winsor and Newton, and I'm just gonna go ahead and grab just a little bit of gouache here and apply it just to my palette. Okay, so I want to add some highlights into our water because right now it's a little bit flat. So in order to achieve that, I'm just going to take some plain white gouache and I'm going to add some of this white around the islands here, kind of like the water's crashing into those. I'm slightly buffing it out. I'm gonna put just a little white in between them as well. So I'm just utilizing the tip of my brush and going back and forth with a left to right motion to kind of get this nice texture. I'm gonna add a little bit just to the right of this rock as well. And then I just want to go in and add just a little bit of white overlapping on some of that rock. Okay, and next I'm just going to take this white and just apply it at the base of this coast right here. And again, I'm doing this really loose left to right motion. There could be some specks of the blue popping through as well. Next, I'm going to do just a little thin amount of the white in this foreground kind of coastal area here. Okay, so I'm just kind of touching up and relayering a little bit more of that white. Okay, and then I'm just going to do a couple touches of the white in the ocean towards the left. And then using just a little bit of water, I'm going to help kind of buff out that area of white just a tad. And using just the side of my brush, I'm just kind of tapping some of that white. Okay, so now I'm going to just start to build some of the greenery down below, and I'm going to use our mixed up green that's slightly darker with the Prussian Blue, Sap Green, and Burnt Umber, and I'm just going to start to incorporate a few stems using really light pressure with my brush. I'm just adding a few subtle stems throughout this greenery, so that way our poppies don't look like they're floating. And I'm kind of starting more so at the base where the stems would be more shaded because they have a little bit of a lack of light. And then we'll start to use some sap green for our stems next, just to have some variegation in the shades of the greenery. Okay, so next I'm just taking just plain sap green because it's a little bit lighter, and we're now kind of moving into the sun where the poppies are well lit. And I'm just gonna work my way through the landscape by connecting some stems to the poppies. They don't all have to be perfectly connected, but just to get a few stems in here so that way they're not totally floating is gonna be very nice just across this whole kind of flowered field overlooking Big Sur. For the last step of the painting, I'm going to mix up some yellow with a little bit of sap green, and I just want to add a little bit more green foliage, kind of mimicking some leaves and some shrubbery. So I'm just going to apply some of this more kind of lime green and add that kind of alongside some of the stems. And it's very loose. I'm just using the tip of my size 4 brush here, and I'm just incorporating some of this nice bright vivid green just to kind of help fill out around the stems, so that way they don't kind of look like kind of floating sticks. And so we're just incorporating this nice greenery throughout. I hope you enjoyed this spring season Big Sur coastal landscape today. I loved painting this, and it's a great way to kick off the spring season. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any upcoming watercolor tutorials.